since the Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Soon it will be 1 year when we are in the new security situation. First of all, it was shock for everyone, including the frontline states, including the Baltic states. Second, we started to discuss how to help, how to assist Ukraine. Then we started our own adaptation process, be it national or within the transatlantic community. In NATO Madrid Summit, a lot of important issues, a lot of important decisions was made also for the Baltic states, but also nationally, as I already mentioned, we started to adapt. For instance, Latvia has an ambition to introduce conscription, the one lasting country in the northeast region, northeast Europe, that conscription wasn't present. So there are a lot of lessons learned already from the Russia's aggression in Ukraine, and definitely there are homeworks to be done in mid-long-term perspective for the Baltic states. Before I introduce with the panelists and kick off the discussion, I would kindly ask Oliver Morvinsky, who is head of the office for the Baltic states of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, for his introductory remarks. And on the behalf of Latvian Institute of International Affairs, thank you, Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, that supported this idea to look at the Baltic states, to look from the Baltic states perspective. What are the lessons learned? What is the homeworks to be done when it comes to our own security? Because I'm sure that, and we have excellent and distinguished experts who will provide some ideas, the necessities to be implemented from our side. So, Oliver, please, introductory remarks.
Thanks a lot, Martins. Hello, everyone. Speaking about lessons learned, it's now a very tough job to speak as a German in these days. So I don't want to bore you with my own opinion about this, because we have a very capable panel today here. And I just wanted to say thank you as a representative from Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung to our long-lasting partner, Latvian Institute of International Affairs, to making this discussion today possible. As you already said, Martins, it's a very big crowd and participation, so it shows how highly important this topic is. I don't have to underline this. What I just want to underline, and I'm very distinguished that we have this excellent panel from the 3 Baltic states of Mr. Kohls, Mr. Nikivicius, Mrs. Kaljurand. I also saw the Ukrainian ambassador to Latvia here today. So we see that this discussion is highly important, and I want to underline that, as I'm not speaking of the German government, which is a bit problematic, but as representative of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, that today's topic, the security in the Baltic Sea region, is not only a topic for the 3 Baltic states, or the hopefully soon 2 member states of NATO in this region, but it's a topic which is needed and important for all of us, the Europeans. And our former Chancellor Angela Merkel said it already in 2017, said as we Europeans have to take our destiny in our own hands. That was, of course, in the aftermath of the election of Donald Trump. And it's true that we Germans were not the forerunners in this regard, I admit. But what is true, that Germany, and especially we as Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, are engaged in this topic. And we need to work together, we as 3 Baltic states, we together with Germany, and also we together in Europe, to tackle this issue and to learn, to draw the consequences from the war in Ukraine and all these developments in this region. So we are engaged in this. We need to work in this regard together to see also the future development when it comes to connection to Russia, however this will look like. So I'm very thankful for you to organizing this event. Thank you also to your team for making this possible. And I'm happily handing over now to you. So I'm thanking Paldies, Achu, and now I'm hanging with the Estonian Eta. Thank you very much. And I wish us all a fruitful discussion and an interesting afternoon.
Thank you.
Martin.
Thank you, Oliver, for introductory remarks. And now let me introduce with the panelists. And I will start, as he already mentioned, just to mention that the friend of Latvia, close friend of Latvia, closest friend of the Latvia, of course, it's Linas Linkevičius, who is Lithuanian diplomat and former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense. Thank you, Linas, for coming from the Vilnius. So we are always glad to see and to hear your so provoking and insightful ideas. Then, joining from Brussels online, but I think in hearts and minds with us today, Marina Kaljurand, who is member of European Parliament currently and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia. Marina, hopefully you hear us loud and clear. Great. Thank you. And last but not least, definitely, newly elected as a chairman of the Foreign Committee of the member of the Parliament of the Republic of Latvia, Richard Skols. Richard. So, colleagues, as I already told you, I would like to start and to give just up to 5-7 minutes for each of you to illustrate or to give your brief overview where we are, what are the initial lessons learned from your perspective, particularly when we are looking at the Baltic states and for the Baltic security. Linas, maybe we can start with you and then continue with the Marina and last but not least, Richard.
Thank you. First of all, if it's okay, if it's working, I hope.
Yes.
First of all, I'm very pleased to be again in Riga. I would like very much. And as you rightly said, a friend of Latvia, but definitely we are all in the same team for a long time and learning lessons together. So first lesson which was learned, it was 2004 when we were joining NATO. It was the right way to go. And that's exactly what was the essence of the situation when we look at today. But when talking about lessons learned all together, we should understand that we are part of bigger team. And here, I'm afraid we should talk about lessons unlearned by Western community, by Western society, which is unfortunately true. So what I'd like to say, this is definitely happening not for the first time when we're saying about war in Ukraine, started in February 24th. So Ukrainians, and I would add also that let's count 8 years more. It started earlier, but when we made this noise, or even not even 2014, I would say 2008, occupation of 20% of Georgia, when it was occupation of sovereign state, 20% of the country, and we really made it quite seriously, and the reaction was not abstract, I would say. If you would look at that, statements were very concrete, and demands what Russia must do was very concrete, not abstract. Nothing was done, literally nothing, and we got back to business as usual very quickly. Not we, but all together, what I mean. And we said that it's not right. Why Russia should respect our demands if we are not respecting ourselves? It was 2008. And we talked, and I talked personally, remember, about Crimea, what I didn't believe at that time, but said, look, something else will happen, and what we'll do then? And then next happened, again, annexation of Crimea, 2014. Again, reaction was very weak. If somebody available can look at this, so to say, TV shows in Russia, you really can agree with me that they were laughing at the sanctions. They said, we did that, and what happened? Nothing happened. And it's true, nothing happened. So 2008, 2014, unlearned lessons. Aggressor understood that price is agreeable. They can do that. It's affordable. And we didn't understand at that time that this is something bigger and more dangerous is happening. So we were really a handful of us trying to do one. I also remember our discussions when, during the presidency of Lithuania in the Council of European Union, second part of 2013, when we were discussing these issues at the beginning, a few taking the floor, frankly, because nobody interested. At the end, there were more because of the reasons we all know. But nobody understood that we have to take it seriously. For instance, strategic communications. Who cares? Brainwashing, to say the truth. And it's also becoming a weapon. And now we see the result of Russian society. It's not another discussion, which is big disease. It's a wound. They will treat this for a long time. And it's happening also not because of us, but with our participation, because we didn't react at all. I remember first discussions in our council that we shouldn't take it seriously because it's freedom of speech. It's just another opinion, another point of view. And it was so difficult to explain that lie is not human right, you know. To lie, it's not freedom of speech, it's something else. If you're doing that deliberately, it's a weapon. It's becoming like a threat, and this is we see the result. So there are many more examples what I can provide now. So it's very important to understand, not only admit and to take it as it was true, but also not to repeat next. So again, since I was allowed 7 minutes, I believe we'll be able to discuss. Will be some questions, but from the Russia's war on Ukraine, we also can see some bottlenecks in our, so to say, situation. First of all, our security, our flank, NATO flank. I was working at NATO for a long time, and I remember that at the beginning, it was also beginning of my, so to say, activity, 2005, 2006, there were even voices of cautiousness, not to discuss Article 5 more proactively, not to have exercises on Article 5 because it will be too aggressive. And we're saying how it could be too aggressive because it's now a treaty. We have to train ourselves, our troops. No, it was too aggressive. Now it's not the case, by the way. Now we're doing that every day, every year. But at that time it was a big problem. And I believe this is also a symptom of what we are receiving. NATO went out of sight, basically, and because we were planning our troops for mobile deployable missions, and forgot that we have to take our security also very seriously. And the new members came, we have no so to say footprint on the territories of new members. It's also maybe objectively or some other reasons, but here are also lessons learned. We have to remedy, we have to do something to improve, and that's exactly what they have to say. So air defense, missile defense, and presence literally, boots on the ground. That should be definitely the argument, the best argument for denying possible aggression in the future. Mobile network resilience, I would say. That was also lessons from that. One more technical, just to mention, communications resilience, transportation or railway. Our gauge is Russian size, as we all know. And as we can see, it's very efficient for Russian troops to supply. And if we will keep it as it was so far, traditionally, maybe that would be vulnerability of our own security. We have to think about that as well in all Baltic states. There are technical issues, there are security issues, and we have to take them very seriously, what we are doing currently. But unfortunately, as I said, there are some lessons which should be learned by all of us together, which were unlearned before. And that's in short would be introductory remarks.
Thank you, Linus, and let me use the rights of moderator and immediately come up with a follow-up question to you. You started with saying the unlearned lessons, or that we saw them coming. I mean, we saw that coming from the Baltic perspective, right? Now or at least most of the representatives of Baltic states participating in such conferences are starting their introductory remarks by saying, "We told you so." And especially when it comes to Germany, France, speaking with the representatives from Spain, Italy, so on and so forth. And this is also kind of a lessons learned. Weren't we too loud, or our arguments or our perception wasn't perceived as necessary? Because, and taking into account your former positions as Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, I'm sure that you met with a lot of representatives from allied countries. This is also our lessons learned, and how we approach our allies, how we manage to have a common mindset, to have common security threat assessment.
Well, I don't think that we were not too loud, I would say. We were even maybe too loud, one can say, because too emotional.
Yep.
And I remember my discussions with my colleagues at that time that maybe you're right, but you're too close to the region. You cannot be objective, you know. Probably you're wrong. And after something happened in their vicinity, they change their mind. There are a lot of examples here. And same as between human beings, you know. When people are behaving, so to say, communicating, and they can see some problems in the neighborhood, there's some empathy, but this is happening not with them, you know, it's something else. And maybe that will go by somehow. Maybe I will escape. And this is an understanding also in the nations, in the countries. And at that time, I believe there's understanding that this is happening, it's wrong things, but it's not with us. And until, yeah, one of the reasons, MH17, right? Mm-hmm. If you talk to Dutch colleagues, I don't know whether somebody from Netherlands here, but I met many of them and discussed before, and they were also relaxed and said, you are too sensitive and maybe you're wrong. And after that, they were shocked and said, what happened? I said, what's supposed to happen, you know, because it happened what safeguard these so to say events, but that happened because we were not behaving in the right way, and it's happening with us personally, and that touched them personally, and that's why it's changed. I believe now it's understanding and perception. We can discuss, you can disagree with me, that this is happening with us, I mean with the West in general, because Russians undermining everything what we have created together. Foundation of security, European security architecture, everything now is challenged, and that means too far and too much. And then understanding is here that we have to react. Unfortunately, it's very expensive now to react. One can say, I shouldn't say too late. We are capable to win. It's really difficult, but it's good. Thanks God, we understand that now, and that's very important. So it's really a game changer in the thinking, in the mindset, which was not the case before, by far not the case. So that's why I believe was the reason when we are not understood, not because, I would say even, no, we were really too emotional maybe at that time.
And it's good to hear from Lithuanian colleague that we might be a bit too loud, right? Marina, to you, what is the reading or what is the feeling from Estonian diplomat living and working in Brussels, Belgium these days?
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I'd also like to thank the Institute and to thank the Foundation for having me in this distinguished panel. Guys, I'm really sorry I couldn't join you. I have to do it online. But yes, it was impossible for me to travel from Brussels today to Riga. Linas, so great to see you. Haven't seen you for a long time. So whenever you come to Brussels, give me a call. Let's have some beer, wine, or whatever. And Riga,
whatever.
such a pleasure to get to know you. I don't think we have met personally before, but it's a real pleasure to participate in today's discussion. It's easy for me to start saying that I agree with everything that Linas said. And personally, I'm not telling our Western partners, we told you so. Because I just feel that we're putting additional salt on the wound, which is so fresh at the moment. But inside, yes, I have the feeling. 2008, war in Georgia, I was Estonian ambassador to Russia. 2014, occupation of Crimea, I was Estonian ambassador to Washington, D.C. And trust me, at all levels, at all meetings, we were raising, all the Baltic states plus some of our Eastern European partners, we were raising the situation with Russia, we were raising the real sense of Putin's regime, but unfortunately, we were not being listened to as thoroughly as we were being listened to today. For me, I hope to bring to today's discussion also the view from the European Parliament, as I'm not a really defense person, I'm more security and diplomacy and now European Parliament person. Security, it has many layers and it has many definitions and many understandings, starting with military, but continuing with energy, climate, refugees, information operations, but also stability of our societies. Estonia being one of the countries receiving per capita a very big number of Ukrainian refugees. And honestly, I'm not sure how difficult the winter will be also for our people. And there are forces in Estonia that are just waiting to play one group of Ukrainians against Russians, Estonians against Russians, and trying to find the ways of unstabilizing our society. So for me, there are very many layers. I will start with defense. Well, again, we told you so. For years, Estonia was calling all allies to raise their GDP for defense to 2% of GDP. We were saying it for years. And as a matter of fact, it was only Trump administration. It was President Obama before that. It was Rumsfeld before that. But they did it in a very polite way, and Europe wasn't listening enough. For my country, it was easy to repeat 2% of GDP because we decided already at the beginning of the 2000s to fulfill our commitment to NATO, and we raised our defense expenditure to 2% of GDP. So there are things that we can do as nations on a national government level. I just looked into the numbers, and in the recent year after the war started, let's say the war of the 24th of February, the second wave of the war started, we see the number of people joining Defense League growing up. So Estonian Defense League, and I'm proud to be member of the Defense League's women's section now already for almost 5 years, the numbers are skyrocketing. So people understand that they have to be educated, they have to be trained to know how to take care of themselves. We're not warmongering, we're not. But it's elementary how to take care during a crisis, how to assist, and not to become a burden yourself. And that's one of the reasons why we see that also voluntarily people are participating more and more in defense and security policy. And of course, needless to say that NATO's deterrence and defense posture, it's important for our nations. I recall our Chief of Defense saying at the beginning of 2022 that for Estonia to be militarily independent, we need annual GDP of 2+% to defense. It's not realistic. So being a small country in the periphery of Europe, close to Russia, it's not realistic that we will be completely militarily able to defend ourselves. And here comes NATO. I'm really happy about the decisions of the Madrid summit. For the first time, Russia was spelled as a threat. For the first time, we had our close partners, not typical close partners, but including South Korea, including others participating in the discussions. I hope that at the next summit, Finland and Sweden will be our NATO ally member states, so that will definitely increase stability and defense and security in our region. And yes, I also agree that military presence is crucial. Putin believes in what he sees. He does not believe in what he reads, but he believes in what he sees. And it is important that our allies are present on our territories. And as you know, that the NATO's enhanced forward presence multinational battle group in Estonia is chaired or governed by Brits. And yes, we are happy with the present cooperation, and we're looking closely into the future cooperation because that's the cornerstone also of Estonia's independence. And my final introductory remarks concern Ukraine. Ukraine needs help. Ukraine needs assistance. Today, foreign ministers are meeting and discussing air defense, are discussing military support to Ukraine. We are hearing some promises coming already, maybe not so many countries being mentioned yet, but there will be also countries being mentioned, but the assistance is needed now. Not the huge bureaucracy, but assistance, military assistance is needed now. And as to the future of security, that's also one of the stereotypes I want to break. When I talk to my colleagues from other regions, they see war in Ukraine as something happening in the backyard of Russia. But it's not a Russian problem. It's not a European problem. It's a global problem. Because for the first time since the Second World War, a permanent member of the Security Council is violating UN Charter. So it means that there can't be security for Europe until the present regime and Putin are not brought justice, are not given fair evaluation of what they have done. And from that perspective, I'm really proud that finally the European Parliament was able to pass last week the resolution recognizing Russia as a state supporting and sponsoring terrorism. So I'll stop here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Marina. And also for you, immediate follow-up question. I couldn't agree more to what you said. Putin believes in what he sees, or Putin respects strength and power, right? And in order to ensure that, and in order to ensure credible deterrence and defense posture in the Baltic states, the presence of allied troops, as you mentioned, is of utmost importance. Having said all of that, what is your, well, what do you see in the parliament and also in Brussels within various institutions? Has the attitude changed towards the Baltic Sea region? I mean, how our allies see the security issues and how to ensure this credible deterrence and defense posture?
This is my very subjective point of view, but I think the picture became very clear for our EU partners and NATO allies after the press conference that took place between High Representative Josep Borrell and Foreign Minister Lavrov. The way how Lavrov was humiliating EU and Western values, not only EU, but Western values, Western principles, Western lifestyle, and the way how poorly, yes, I'm sorry to say that, but how poorly High Representative answered to the criticism during that press conference, I think it made it very clear that Russia can't be our partner, Russia can't be strategic partner, or whatever word we use for that. So I think that was one of the first steps that led to recognizing Russia as a threat to alliance, and it led to the next steps. I do not see that, yes, I think that at the moment there is common understanding among EU and member states and NATO allies about the present situation. I think there is common understanding about the need of strengthening Eastern flank. Yes, we have to take into account our financial and other resources of our allies, and maybe that's why the presence on the ground is sometimes can be substituted by preparedness back in their countries, joint exercises, and readiness to be deployed as soon as possible. So we have to look into different means, but I see that there is the readiness. NATO is speaking in one voice. Now, in preparation for Vilnius, I think there will be difficult discussions when we will be discussing the future of Ukrainian and Georgian possible membership in the alliance. That might draw our partners to different positions and might bring up different opinions. So it's better to we have to keep our EU together, we have to keep our alliance together, we have to speak in one voice. Because what Putin is good at, he's good at playing one country against another country, one member state against another member state, and creating problems if he sees a soil for creating problems within the alliance and the EU members in EU. So we can't be tired of the war. We can't have fatigue about the war, and we have to have aggression high on political agenda until the appropriate response will be given by international courts, by international community, by international institutions to the aggression of Russia towards Ukraine. If we do not do that, we can't talk about security and stability in Europe and globally.
Thank you, Marina. We we can't afford to have fatigue. Well noted. Richard, to you, I fully understand that after 2 Baltic representatives, it's hard to be the 3rd one. But still, also nationally, we have differences, right? As I told in my introductory remarks, we were the last ones without conscription. Now we are thinking about that. Some national policies, some national adaptations. What is the perspective of politician re-elected in the parliament when it comes to our security?
So thank you for having me here. And well, I understand opportunity to have my introductory remarks. I have to answer straight the question, but no, I will try to introductory remarks which will connect to your question in the end. Today we're discussing the Baltic countries, the lessons learned. And for us, there's a lot of lessons we're not only learned, but we are still learning from, unfortunately, right now, Ukraine's still heroic freedom fights from their experience. And we see what are still our weaknesses, what weaknesses we expose ourselves to as well, and what we need to address immediately to avoid such not mistakes but vulnerabilities. And for us, yes, there are tectonic changes in the mindsets across Europe. Baltic countries, as you mentioned here, that let's not put salt on open wounds and saying we were right. No, we have to continue to say that and adding additional sentence. Thank you for recognizing that we were right, but do listen to us now. Because, one thing is to dwell around a year that you were right, but okay, that's fine. But now we are taking initiative. We know the enemy, more or less, the mindset, the mentality. Unfortunately, we've been right. So therefore, examples. Visa ban for Russian citizens. Again, that was actually first suggested in March. Let's ban visa for Russian citizens. So how many months it took? For more or less for everyone to understand, look, yes, the whole Russian society is actually accountable for their regime's actions in Ukraine. But lessons learned. I would say, I want to be provocative here. In a way that's, yes, we tend to say that, we know best what Russia thinks and what is, their true intentions. It's been on constant basis, be it the history's revisionism as well. It took years for the West actually to realize that actually Russia is twisting history at the global scale, at the UN and etc. And we have to counter that. Yes, sometimes, we've been labeled as the red flag raisers and so on, and alarmists. Not that recently, maybe misinterpretation, but I don't think that was a misinterpretation. Warmongers as well by some leader of the EU countries. And this is something that, we can take it harshly, but also we have made our own mistakes when we lose the focus on our own backyard. Like, for example, since its announcement on Nord Stream 2, we've been constantly against it, pushing, Europe, transatlantic community. This is a weapon in hands of Putin. But at the same time, we are still, even right now, dependent on Russian gas. Baltic countries. Yes, Lithuania not anymore, not buying. We're starting next year, January. But for 10 years, we're saying stop Nord Stream 2. But at the same time, we have this vulnerability. And we see that Putin is using energy as a weapon. I mean, again, Ukraine is experiencing this. Targeted civilian infrastructure. And this is, the question. How secure is our infrastructure overall? Energy, interconnectivity, electricity. And this provides me an answer. The lessons learned is we have to work much more closely with the Baltic countries, because the indicator that showed a very good example where this cooperation was actually 2021 summer, Lukashenko regime, and hybrid threats that were posed to instrumentalize migration. The cooperation among the Baltic countries plus Poland was really an answer, and it also gave the opportunity, once again, to show the true image of Lukashenko to the rest of the Europe. But in the same time, why I'm saying we still have the stone in our own backyard, well, we've been quiet on Lukashenko for years, you know, cooperating. And etc. So this is something where, you know, it's a reality check for ourselves as well, how we look at things and how we interpret them. But the changes that we have witnessed for the past 9 months, particularly after the Madrid summit, because all people in this room, I guess, understand before the 24th of February, Madrid summit was actually, I think one topic was on the agenda, the next Secretary General. Who will be next Secretary General? And that most likely was the agenda for Madrid summit. But what we managed to do is change the mindset within the NATO that it's not enough anymore deterrence by presence. It has to be deterrence by denial. You know, these statements made by Biden and others, not a centimeter, you know, because I always correct them. Don't use the term not an inch, because it's way too much already. It's yes, not a centimeter, and this requires, of course, and again through the painful experience of Ukrainians, what the West saw, because before that it was interpreted, you know, from Russia's activities as the saber rattling, but after Bucha, after Irpin, actually Russia has helped itself in West Highs to see what kind of atrocities it has committed, its army, its troops, and etc. And through these, we understand that we cannot even allow, that was before when it comes to Baltic defense, the 4x30. So in 30 days, 30 battalions, air, navy, and infantry. That is way too long, 30 days. We see what the occupiers can do within days, the atrocities, and that is the painful experience of Ukrainians in the first days of the war, and what the West saw afterwards on the war crimes committed in Bucha and Irpin and etc. And on top of that, of course, we see just the final remarks, the other areas where I still see the Baltic countries together needs to really put their heads together is the civil defense. One thing is, you know, the conventional defense capabilities, military and etc. But civil defense and what we see in Ukraine, I mean, do we have the proper infrastructure in case of, you know, our acts for our people to find a shelter and others? Well, let's be very honest, we don't have it. We don't have it, and that's the very big vulnerability. And last but not least point I wanted to make, the Baltic cooperation. There's so many more room that we can improve. Like, for example, we can actually go beyond Article 5. We can sign trilateral agreements with 3 countries that in case of external aggression, we don't have to wait for the NATO Council to come together and decide, is it Article 4 or is it Article 5? Our troops can go to assistance to our neighbors. Be it, you know, in case of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia can send. And that is the cooperation. That is immediate response to any external threat. And I think that is the area where we have to work. I don't, you know, doubt Article 5, absolutely not. But I think we have to think in a way also beyond that. Because, you know, we see that it takes time to convene meetings and to deliver on joint decision. But at time of war, time is of essence, and time is lives. So maybe I didn't answer directly your posed question, but I think there's a lot of homework. I mean, compulsory service, yes, Latvia is the last country in the region not having it. Yes, we are ready to go it. Defense expenditure, it's already, I mean, that is the new government declaration. I cannot reveal yet what are the parts, but we are considerably planning to increase the defense expenditure. Absolutely.
Thank you, Richard. And also, illustrating that there are definitely also homeworks when it comes to some elements of our military cooperation, exactly our own activities during the D-Day, if it is coming. But speaking of time, I mean, and Lena started that we have to look at actually not only 8 years, but actually more back. But we can also look in front of us, and it's not only, as we say, it's not only Russia's Putin, but it's also Putin's Russia, right? Probably we are here in the long-term perspective, dealing with the Putinism, whatever it means, be it the President Putin or anyone else, but with the same ideology. How to deal with this Russia from the Baltic perspective?
Well, it's not a one man's battle, absolutely not. And I think we have achieved a lot in the past, let's say, 15 years, actually exposing what Russia is, what tools it uses internationally. Yes, more and more the West is waking up, be it, the disinformation. We are finding instruments to tackle, to provide, with alternative and trusty sources to the citizens. But, with Russia and society in general, somebody was asking about, and Latvia is being also labeled as hosting the independent media and etc. And somebody even labeled Latvia can become the bastion for the Russian opposition. To tell you honestly, I don't want that to happen. If we look at the 20th century, the Russian opposition, I'm not talking only the Soviet Union, but Tsarist and etc. To the core is the Russian chauvinist. The view on the neighboring countries is from the above. You're not equal, and etc. So, therefore, if somebody asks about the civil society, I use the Astafiev, Russian writer, quote. So you can wake up somebody who's asleep, but you cannot wake up someone who pretends that he's asleep. So that is my description of civil society in Russia currently, unfortunately.
Thank you. Linus, Marina, on this one, any thoughts or comments before we open the floor?
Let's talk to
the
people.
Yeah, just a reminder, not only the persons, attendees in person, but also online watchers can ask the question. There's somewhere up in the TV the Slido QR code that you can use and raise the question. I will receive them in my smartphone. So, but I open the floor. Of course, Atis, please introduce yourself and to whom you would like to ask the question.
I have a question to all three panelists and maybe to you too. And well, I'm a former member of the parliament. I decided not to run anymore. I was his vice chairman, Foreign Relations Committee. The question is this: with the coming of winter and Russia's massive missile attacks against infrastructure, isn't this now a question of Russia wanting to exterminate the Ukrainian nation? Haven't we come to that? Because how do you survive in winter without warmth? I mean, we're warm here, right? And electricity. And it all adds up, because haven't we have to recognize that Russia, Putin cannot afford to lose this war. So what have they to do not to lose the war? And about warmongers, Richard, there was an American congressman or even a senator who during the recent elections, midterm elections, declared that the Democrats were warmongers because America is supplying too many weapons to Ukraine. Well,
but now after elections, they support supplying weapons to Ukraine. So
they're better.
The Americans.
This the question?
Well, that's my question. Do we have to recognize that to be or not to be, that we must see that this is a war of extermination against the whole nation by Russia?
Okay.
Can I?
Linus, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Also good to see you after many years. You know, let's take facts. And a Russian special terrorist operation taking place more than 9 months. This is the truth. And what they're targeting civilians, deliberately targeting civilians. They're deliberately targeting critical infrastructure, especially when winter approaching. And when it was Golodomor, as you know, and now it's Holodomor, as one can say, to rephrase this Russian term, and they would like to freeze these people. They're supposed to free, by the way, which is also surprising. But more than 9 months, is it not too many? And we still have the self-restrictions in providing support. We're doing a lot. We are doing what we can do, but we are not making, so to say, breakthrough in this. I mean, Baltic countries are talking about this decisive, essential equipment, military equipment, and still self-restrictions, not to provide long-range artillery, for instance, not to provide tanks, not to provide jets. After what happened, should be no red lines anymore, in my understanding. It should be done. And by the way, more to say, if there are launch sites where they are really addressing these, targeting these civilian targets, they should be legitimate targets, regardless where they are. Even if they are close to, in the Russian territory, close to the Ukrainian border, it also should be the case. It's not yet the case, because this is sensitivity, or whatever you can call, but these games should end one day, because it's really happening too much. Is it genocide or not? Let legal experts to decide. But when you are targeting and trying to really exterminate whole nation, just because they are Ukrainians, just because they do not agree that they are Russians, because they were told you are Russians, and if you don't agree, then you should be killed. It was said many times in the TV programs everywhere. So we are facing the situation which is very dramatic, and we should ask ourselves, why are still restricting ourselves from supporting Ukraine in terms we have to do that. So that would be my kind of comment here. Easy to say, not so easy to implement, but we have to overcome this someday when it is not too late.
Perfect. Marina, Richards on this one. Marina, please.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to reflect on what Richard said about visa ban. Richard, there is no EU visa ban to Russians. There is a decision to stop the visa facilitation agreement, and there are some member states who have banned visas to Russian tourists, but there is no general EU approach, because trust me, it's impossible to reach it in Brussels. The same way European Parliament was calling for a complete embargo on all Russian energy sources already in March, but governments were not ready to do that. And that's the reality in Brussels. Not all the governments are on the same page. Condemning war, yes. Condemning Russian aggression, yes. Supporting Ukraine, yes. But as soon as it comes to concrete steps, visa banning, energy resources, everybody's fighting for their own interests. Now, reflecting on what the gentleman said, I would go further. I would say that it's a genocide. And I'm saying it as a lawyer and as a politician, because what Russia is doing today has all the elements of genocide, starting from questioning Ukraine as a nation, Ukraine as a state, and so on and so on and so on. So there has to be answer to that can be done today, I would argue, through international courts. Russia and Ukraine, they are not members of the ICC, none of them, which means that there has to be established a new court that will evaluate the situation and that will give a fair response to Russia's aggression. And my last remark also on the sanctions, I think it also came from Richards. When we talk about sanctions, yes, Europe's response has been weak, much weaker than personally I would like it to be, and I'm a social democrat. But the reality is we have a consensus policy. And then comes the question, are we ready to go for qualified majority in order to get more quick results, more effective results, and not die in the European bureaucracy? Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Richard.
Great. Many things have to respond. Marina, with all due respect, I didn't say that there is achieved, visa ban on for Russian citizens. What I was inclining is that we raised this question. There was already no willingness to look into this question, but then after 6 months raising again, we achieved that actually those countries that have a land border with Russia can actually close the border without any then, from the European Commission pointing and so on. So that is a breakthrough, because at some point there wasn't even a willingness to allow that to happen. So that is something to changing the mindset and for us to explaining the reasons why we are doing that, and that, we are, because otherwise there will be the question of rule of law, if this country is following the EU treaties and everything and all that. But with this, you saw the reaction in Russia. They didn't care that their regime is killing, innocent Ukrainian civilians. They were just, but I will not be able to go to, to Cannes and to Nice and etc. And that shows the immorality that lives in modern Russian society. And that is something that the West needs to understand. It's not only the political elite, it's the whole society is poisoned with this kind of thinking, with imperialistic ambition. So just coming back on your question you raised, could you please remind me, because I so much focused on what Marina said. Yes. Well, you see that the perpetrator of this aggression is something not new. The world has seen the same perpetrator in 20th century with the same signature as he does: deportations, rapes, and all of that. So we see that the announcements by the elites of the regime is to exterminate Ukrainians as a nation, as an ethnic group, and that is by definition genocide. But of course that is for legal experts to define, and that has been always said in that direction, but it doesn't exclude for us to really call things as they are. And Latvia's parliament, as well as Lithuania's and Estonia's, has recognized the actions of Russia in Ukraine as the genocide against the Ukrainian people.
Thank you, Richard. I see questions coming. Please, gentlemen, over there.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation. In the context of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, what would you say, in your opinion, are the Russian and Putin in particular, their weaknesses? And as a follow-up to that, will the Russian influencers be degraded substantially in Europe and in particular in the Baltics?
Yep. Maybe we can start now with the Marina, Richards, and then Linus. Please, Marina. Marina, please.
Marina, it's your turn.
Sorry guys. Yes, weaknesses. I think that the weaknesses have been discussed in many forums, and I agree that the main weakness was military weakness of Russia and intelligence weakness of Russia, or at least those who were providing information to Putin. I think that he was given wrong information about the military strength, but also about the ability of Ukraine to answer their aggression. And now coming to the global level, what we unfortunately see today is that world is divided. Yes, on some resolutions, majority of countries support that it's not that the Russian aggression is illegal. But as soon as we move beyond that, for example, in Africa, there was recently EU-Africa Summit, and African countries were complaining that EU is causing starvation in Africa because of sanctions introduced by EU against Russia. So they were repeating Kremlin talking points. And unfortunately, Kremlin is still very strong with its propaganda in third countries, but also with its propaganda in our countries. Okay, I'm not speaking on behalf of Latvia, Lithuania, we'll never do that. But Russian-speaking population in Estonia, despite banned channels, is still very strongly supporting Putin's aggression. So they have information operations, propaganda, that's been always a very strong weapon in the hands of Kremlin, and they're still using it.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Well, on weaknesses, well, again, no military expertise on my side. I don't know about the army. I still think it has still considerably large potential, despite all the mobilization and all that. We should not underestimate that. I think that is very clear. The weakness might be actually right now the Putin's biggest strength. It's gas and oil. And I think if that is being cut off, as it was in the 90s to the Soviet Union, it will just collapse. I mean, there's nothing else that keeps up the Russian economy. It's the gas and oil. And of course, right now, the looking for other... And the weakness, I think the weakness is, it's already the considerable dependency on China. It's already there. I think the realization maybe it's not yet, but it's just a matter of time when actually, and last but not least, I have always thought of this as what is the weakness and what is the biggest fear for the Russians is the size of Russia. And that's the Russia's biggest weakness. And you have 26 autonomous republics, you have 90 regions with autonomous also responsibilities, and we have to work towards strategic defeat of Russia. And it's possible because it is the so-called waterhead. Everything is in the Moscow region. Beyond that, it's just wilderness and third world country, in my view.
Thank you, Linus.
I would say weakness of Putin is his madness, basically, because he went too far, and definitely what he did so far, he was very successful. He took Crimea, there was no consequences, and he recollecting land, so to say, and now he went again, offended Ukraine, and probably miscalculated, not a bit, but quite hard. And now all elite can see that he really failing. And more signs that this disaster is unavoidable for Russia. So he's trapped himself and led country to the abyss, basically. And now he personally has no exit strategy. He simply has no opportunity. And now it's a question how long it will take. How big is the threshold of patience for elite, for the people at large, for everyone? And this is his weakness. So we have not to help him, that's my point. Because what I'm meaning, there are, how I should say, many or maybe many of those in Europe, our allies, who are ready to have business with him after everything will end up. That's true, unfortunately. And when everything will end up, they will going to have business with him as well, because he's leader of the country, which is very strong, and we have to treat them seriously. And that's a big mistake again. He should understand that he's no go. He's something what he did. It's a crime against humanity. It's whatever you can take. And he cannot be treated as a leader of the country after what he did. But unfortunately, it's not the case. So it's his weakness, but at the same time, he still expects that he would survive. And our task to make sure that he will not succeed. And this is not a done deal. It's not a done deal, even now. So we have to take it very seriously. It's not just about moral reasons. It's about very pragmatic reasons. Because what we're talking now, what we mistreated before, it was not just moral mistakes. They were very, very substantial material mistakes, because it costs a lot. Now it's very difficult to remedy. It's very difficult to correct, basically. And we have to understand. So not to repeat that's very important. And I'm afraid this is a big problem. So weakness at the same time challenge for him. And now he's calculating that we will be weak enough to be split. weak enough to have this fatigue on all the support to Ukraine because of winter, because of energy prices, whatever, and that his last resort, because he was blaming, I mean, bluffing about this nuclear threats endlessly after caution, so to say, remarks, not just from the US but also from China. He calmed down, but never. So last instrument was kind of given away, and now he just can rely on this massive assault, not selecting his victims and targeting civil population, which is definitely end state, right? So we have to be consistent. We have to be united, and we definitely have to tell quite clearly that this is not something we will take it as a new normal in the future, and that's weakness, but at the same time challenge for him.
Thank you, Linus. Before we go with the another questions here in audience, one from the online, and particularly for Marina. You mentioned the observation of not the huge bureaucracy, but the assistance is what Ukraine needs from us now. So I would like to ask for your perspective on how should we change our bureaucratic way of working. Do you think the allies or the EU in the Brussels bubble itself will rewrite its own rule in order to act more swiftly and rapidly? Marina, it's for you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you please repeat?
Basically, long story short, is about the bureaucratic model of how EU is working. Is EU ready to adapt to the new environment that we are living, to act more rapidly and swiftly?
Yeah, it's impossible for me to speak on behalf of all the institutions within the EU, but I can say that in the European Parliament, yes, it was discussed how to have quick and rapid processes, at least for microfinancing and for the funds allocated to Ukraine to reach Ukraine. So I see there is willingness. There is willingness on the Parliament side. I see there is willingness on the Commission side. But now what will governments do? How quickly governments will react? That's another question. Because I would say that as the European Parliament, we are ahead of governments. And it's easier for us because we speak as politicians. And then governments have to implement that. But we will continue putting pressure on Commission and government, that's for true. That's for sure. Because if the decisions are being made, assistance is needed today, immediately, yesterday. We just can't go through all the discussions and through all the bureaucracy. Yes, so yes, from the Parliament side, there is willingness, and we passed appropriate resolution last week.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I give the floor for the question over here. Please introduce yourself. Push. Yeah, it's working.
It should work. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Alexander Olech, Defense 24, currently research fellow at the NATO Stratcom. I'm from Poland, so I totally agree with all your remarks. I mean, Poland did an exceptional job, helping Ukrainians, and also we are Baltic States, so we totally agree with everything what has been said. However, I'm also a researcher. I'm from the academia. And I do observe Russia and France and also the rivalry in Africa. Marina mentioned Africa. It's a very interesting case. So my question is, before I give you my remark, what the Baltic states could do to convince those superpowers, for example France, that will be more engaged. For example, I do remember the military drill in June. They sent 100 paratroopers to Estonia to show that within 6 hours they are ready to help Estonia if something happens. And my case is that we have so many other theaters all over the world, Indo-Pacific, Africa, for example, Sahel. Currently, Mr. Macron is in the US. They are having conversations about, for example, Ukraine, but there is also the case of Indo-Pacific because the US would like to be there. We have also the case of Sahel. 3 days ago, someone, because we still don't know, bombed the headquarters in Central African Republic. It was the headquarters of the Wagner Group. So my case is that from our perspective, I mean Poland, because Poland has also very tense ties with the France, and also for the Baltic states, it's difficult to discuss those issues because those superpowers have other theaters. So how to convince them to be engaged here? Because, for example, all states were invited to help France 2016, 2012, Barkhane, Serval, all those missions. So my question is how to convince them that Ukraine is more important than, for example, other things. Because I used to live in France, and there they are quite exhausted because they heard about Yemen, they heard about Syria, they heard about Maghreb. So those citizens are choosing their president. So President Macron currently, we are asking him help Ukraine. However, his party, and also he has been chosen because his citizens would like to have low prices and, you know, the good environment for living. So my remark and question, how to convince. Thank you.
With France, you need the convincing why Ukraine is important. Ukraine is fighting our war, and that is understood across Europe, at least European countries altogether, because it's not about only territorial integrity, but it's also the rules-based international order. So if that is really, you know, we leave it as wild, wild west, then their interests, as you mentioned, in Sahel and so on, also can be disregarded and so on. But I would like to mention that lately, I mean, not in months, but in years, Baltic countries have actually shown that we are not just only defense consumers, we're also providers of the defense. Be it, you know, also in operations in Mali as well, being besides the French troops, having NATO missions as well. We've been in Afghanistan, Iraq. So we are not just consumers of NATO defense, we're also providing. And that is, you know, and also if we look at the defense expenditure, I mean, yes, it was after the whole alliance was pointed with the finger, you know, increase your defense expenditure, but we have never looked back, only forwards, you know, increasing, and it's not just by thicken the box that we have increased, but looking really how that strengthens our capabilities, regional capabilities. And that said, we see that in Madrid summit, there was also a decision to strengthen the whole eastern flank. So there are new battle groups established in Central and South of Europe. You have Slovakia, you have Romania, and France is leading over there, one of those battle groups. And I think, and that is my conviction, that actually Baltic countries should send their troops to those battle groups as well, in a solidarity, because, you know, Romanian and Slovakian troops are in the Baltic region, Romanians are in Poland, and Slovakians, if I'm not mistaken, they're in Latvia. So in that sense, I don't think that the political establishment in France, there is some doubts that, you know, we need to defend and we need to strengthen the resilience in the Baltics. Maybe slightly different might be within the society, because it's multinational society, and, you know, you have groups of different interests, and then, you know, at some point you can see that France is more advocating for Armenia and etc., while Armenia is taking very pro-Russian stance. So go figure.
Okay, Marina, on this one, any thoughts? Is the perception that
yes, thank you.
Yep.
I think that solidarity is exactly the right word. I remember so well in 2015, 2016, together with Linus, we were at the foreign ministers' meetings in the middle of migration crisis. And when some of the EU member states were asking for our assistance during the migration crisis, it was exactly the message I was forwarding back to my society back in Estonia and to my government. If we want our partners to take our problems and our challenges seriously, we have to take their problems and challenges seriously. We just can't expect them to assist us if we do not assist them during difficult times. So the basic point of solidarity. And I also agree that there might be different opinions, and the gentleman before was referring to the Congress of the US Congress. Well, there is Zhirinovsky in every parliament. Sometimes I listen to what Estonian parliamentarians are saying, and it drives me crazy. And we shouldn't pay attention to some weird statements or to the statements that represent just minor voices. We should look at what specific governments and countries are doing as administrations. That's what counts, not the weird statement. And on France, now I'm speaking as the member of the European Parliament. I see in my group that, as I said before, there is war fatigue. I see that the members of the European Parliament who are representing their electorate are today more worried about energy prices, inflation, high costs, than people being killed in Ukraine. That's a reality. And they respond to the wishes of their electorate. So that's why, again, it's important to have very good relations on government side, on administration side, and that can change. Even if there are weird voices or not so supportive voices coming from parliaments and politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. Linus, very briefly.
Oh, and Richard, do not agree on Armenia. What you said that Armenia is taking presently very pro. Listen to what Pashinyan said a week ago, criticizing Putin, which means that there are slight changes. Yes, they're dependent on Russia, their economy is dependent on Russia, but we have to recognize there are some small changes.
From that.
I think that there will discussions after the public debate among Baltic Balts in the closed room, right? But Linus,
how to make it briefly?
Yeah, briefly.
First of all politics is domestic, so shouldn't be surprised that everybody cares about own domestic. Same in France, some everywhere. But some countries supposed or some claiming to be leaders, right? Leading European way. And France among them, definitely. So they should care also about external, so to say, challenges. And that's the argument. And I don't think that we should be complacent or so to say, it shouldn't be one-way street. We should talk in candid way, open way. And what we have to do, it was the reason why we sent our troops to Mali, by the way. Exactly, that it's important, it's a priority of France, and we did that not because of Lithuanian priority, definitely. And same, but we have to be also quite candid and frank when we are discussing issues which were not shared by us, like European army, for instance, which is, God knows what that means. As a former defense minister, I can tell. Or let's say about NATO, which is brain dead. It was also mentioned. Was quite counterproductive. Obsolete was from another side of the ocean.
Or political.
Was also not very helpful. So that should be also addressed decently. We shouldn't just accept as without any conditions. Let's talk. Let's discuss. But those who supposed to lead, they really have to lead and to take care about everything, not only domestic issues, and I believe we have a chance to do that. We have opportunity, and we will do that.
Thank you. I think that we are coming to an end. I would collect last 3 questions, and I see there is exactly 3 questions, starting with the ambassador, and all of them collect and then give the possibility for the speakers.
Thank you very much. I should like to raise a question about solidarity. Probably all of us admire solidarity of European community. I remember in very beginning of war, President Levy said such kind of phrase that Putin surprised us by this violation Ukraine. And now time to surprise Europe to Putin. And solidarity, it was surprise for Putin, I consider it exactly. But what kind of solidarity? When we're proud about this solidarity, we can see people in Ukraine not satisfied with this kind of solidarity because it's still not enough to defeat Putin and stop Putin. Sometimes it's contradictions that in time of Europe admires the solidarity, all time reiterated we are solidarity, we accept some such kind of sanctions, etc., and people in Ukraine still wait more and more and more. Richard said very truly, each day, each minute, it means that we lost people lives in front, in peaceful population, atrocity, etc., etc. That's why this is not, I understand that too easy now to speak me here because I'm among all of our allies, all of our friends who support us. Probably it will be much difficult if we will speak in Brussels. I know from some members of parliament, European Parliament, Sandra Canlienti, etc., told me how difficult sometimes is to reach this solidarity with some people from other countries, and you reiterated also this. Because people are naive, or I don't believe that people naive. Sometimes it's a cynicism. Probably minister said that even now people ready to restart cooperation with Putin after. This we need to strong isolation policy for all level. Time to time here, even here in Riga, I listen some propositions that we need to divide. Putin is one case, but ballet or cinema or article of Russia is something we need to respect. Tchaikovsky, we need to respect our all-time time. What Tchaikovsky, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and others gave such people that committed atrocity in Bucha, in Irpin, etc. We need to reject all of this. All, because the real face of Russia is the Bucha, Irpin, Izum, and others. This is the reality. If we accept some kind of dividing, this culture is the one case, and musicians the other case, but Putin and their allies are absolutely the criminals. No. No. You can consider each day that when we start discussion about some kind of things, that it means we give possibility to army of Putin to destroy my country, to kill innocent people in the UK, and to prolong this situation. And after all, we will have again situation. Probably we accept situation that we stop war, and Putin will agree that he will pay reparation, etc., etc. But what after that? After that, we will have again situation when our children will start war against Putin or new Lavrov or new other Shoigu, etc., etc. That's why we ask, and President Zelensky asked, give us weapons. We have possibility to stop the Soviet Union, because current Russia is still Soviet Union. Other form, but is still Soviet Union, aggressive state. And only Ukrainian army have possibility to stop this policy of new Soviet era. That's why we ask, and sometimes presidents very emotionally, because we can see each day this atrocity, we can see this is the kills of people, etc., innocent people, etc. That's why it's difficult to conclude the one kind of solidarity. Solidarity of high level, not low. High level, it isolate Russia for all kind of possibilities, in weapons, in culture, whatever. From my point of view, all of Russians now are responsible for this war, all kind. Voted, not voted, accept Putin regime, not accept. It's very interesting that high level, for my wisdom, Russians accept responsibility. We can see that Professor Zubov, Nevzorov, or Akunin, all of them accept that we are responsible for such kind. But others not responsible. All times they reiterated, for me, ambassador, you're so tough. You demand that need to stop us, to isolate us, but we don't support Putin. We all time reiterated that we are not a Putin, etc. But if Ukrainian not support policy of Yanukovych, Ukrainian come to Maidan and stand by life and demand for authorities to stop this policy, pro-Russian policy. You can see for Russia. You can see the change, nothing. The reality. That's why all of them responsible for this war. All of them. Only isolation, because the tough isolation for all kind of cooperation with Russia can stop this war and to give possibility of Ukrainian army to defeat army of Putin, and after that will be collapse of political system, and only after that probably in our border will be new Russia with whom we can speak, but not now.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your comments. Please, yes, one question there, and then Anastasia.
Yes, Erik Mormi, Estonian ambassador to Latvia. As Lina said, we don't know how long this war lasts, but there is no quick solution, it's clear. But now, when we talk about perspectives, how do you see three things develop in the next year? Because next year is probably will determine the future of Ukraine, that will determine the future of Europe and the global security as well. And three issues here: peace, dialogue with Russia, and sanctions. And also in regarding with Ukraine and the perspective for Ukraine, the two very important meetings next year. One is Vilnius NATO Summit. What is the perspective for Ukraine there? And also to Marina, the question regarding Ukraine's EU perspective. That is a very positive development to see this year. How do you see that from the Brussels perspective?
Thank you. And last one, please, Anastasia. Yes, over there, Mike, over there.
Good afternoon. I'm the student at Riga Student University, as well as Deputy Assistant at Parliament of Latvia. And my question would be, what should be our approach to dialogue with Turkey, as well as Hungary, taking into account that countries has ambiguous relations with Russia, and for example, Turkish forces have never rotated within the framework of EFP to the Baltic countries. Thank you.
So, three questions. Solidarity, responsibility, and assistance to Ukraine that was mentioned by Ambassador. How to ensure three elements simultaneously: peace, dialogue with Russia, sanctions, and last but not least, Turkey. Our allies, Turkey and Hungary. I would like to start with Richard, then Marina, and concluding Linus, please.
Great set of questions. Well, to Ambassador, the three ingredients for the next year, the peace. I mean, it's only through what Ukraine defines as the talking points. That is also for negotiations. That is my understanding. I mean, as Russia calls it, collective West has failed actually Ukraine since 2014 with all the Minsk, Normandy formats and etc. We didn't fulfill them. Actually, Ukraine was in full scale invaded. So therefore, right now, to have any credibility that we might be facilitators for any talks whatsoever, I don't think Ukraine will agree to that, and neither do I will. So therefore, it's up to Ukraine. And in the meantime, yes, the utmost support, military support, financial support, and I think the next year might be breaking point for the EU. I think, and generally for the EU. What do we do with the seized assets of Russia? And I think it's time. It's time to have a legal tools available in our disposal that at national level, at the EU level, we actually start to seize assets from Russian Federation to actually divert to Ukraine. Be it, purchasing weapons, being reconstructing certain cities, towns, regions, and etc. It has to be put to the practice. And this is for Putin to understand there won't be going back to normal. No, this is it. I mean, those 300 billions, you won't see, as he likes to say it, as donkey's ears, right? Or something like that. So, yes, that donkey's ears, exactly. That's the only thing he will get. And to our ally Turkey, well, it's a complex one. But so far, we saw the issues when it came to Baltic defense as well. The defense plan approval, it was blocked by Turkey. But again, not because they don't like Baltic countries. Again, it was internal, a bilateral dispute among two NATO member states because one other NATO member state was blocking the defense plan for Turkey's region. So that was tit for tat, and unfortunately Baltic countries were hostages of that situation. Right now Turkey does play a crucial role when it comes to enlargement. I think they will withhold their decision till next May when they have the elections. So maybe only after that we might see something, breakthrough. But I'm convinced that Sweden and Finland will be. And as NATO Secretary General said, that if there will be any external dangers to Finland and Sweden, we will have the Article 5, even though it's not applicable. NATO will come to the assistance. And last but not least, Turkey is playing right now a crucial role in South Caucasus. I think what we are seeing, the throwing out of Russia from all the formats, from everything, is also partially doing of Turkey. We see that Turkic language is being restored in more than 7 countries. So no more Russian language as well. Kirillits is not anymore. And that is a trend. I think it's also for no return. And last but not least, sorry, I'm abusing my colleagues' time to answer the questions, is that, well, we have to understand, Erdogan is somewhat having also this autocratic sense of, Ottoman Empire, the regional hegemony. That is something where we see that, it is leaning towards you, but it is trusted NATO ally. I mean, yes, we had tough times in the past, not in that recent, but partially we can blame ourselves as well, because in 2016 we saw that the relations between Turkey and the rest of the NATO allies deteriorated after the failed coup d'etat, when actually for a week there was a silence from EU member states, not condemning the attempted coup and etc. And I think Erdogan took it very personally, and that took several years to actually digest that.
Thank you, Richard. Marina, your concluding remarks and answers to the questions.
Yes, thank you. I'll also try to be very brief. Eric, I didn't see you, but it's good to hear you. Candidate status. I think the decision came too late. It should have been done already in March. It took 3-4 months of negotiations among member states and depicted very clearly how divided EU was on future enlargement towards Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. If EU was not able to give candidate status until June, it says that membership is not realistic in the foreseen future. So yes, there will be negotiations starting. Yes, the EU will assist Ukraine in the negotiation process. I understand that the final decision will be made somewhere next autumn. But what's important is also to manage expectations from the Ukrainian side, so that there is not going to be quick process, neither in EU nor in NATO. Now on Vilnius Summit, at least to reiterate what was said in Madrid, to invite our partners there, to talk to them at the same table, and to send a very clear signal to Russia that their NATO ambitions are being taken seriously on the Bucharest level, on the Madrid level, if not more. And sanctions and solidarity. I'm often very disappointed with the EU, but here I want to say that EU has been united on sanctions. And it's not easy to get Orban on board. Yes, we have to buy him on board. We have to promise him something. It's not easy. But so far, on sanctions, EU has been united. And it is a big thing. And this, I think, it was a bad surprise also to Putin. And Ambassador, I'm sorry, but a responsibility. I do not agree with you that everybody in Russia is responsible for what's happening. We still have Nuremberg process and the principles. People can be responsible for their acts. I lived in Russia. I saw how the brainwashing started from the first grade and how people were raised under the propaganda. And I just do not see that they can be responsible for what the regime is doing. So as it was most probably the last time I speak, thanks. It was such a pleasure and I enjoyed this conversation very, very much. Give me a call when you come to Brussels.
Thank you, Marina. We will do. Definitely. Definitely, Richard will do. Linus, please.
Yeah, briefly on Turkey. Turkey, in short, is not in love with Russia. Turkey has own interests, always defending its interests. It was in the past, it will be in the future. And also a very important player in the region. So let's take it as reality, and that's it. More respect, talk to them, dialogue. That's really important. Sometimes it's not the case, by the way, which is not good. Hungary is another story. I hope it will be changed in the future. When it comes to the what will be next, many ifs. If we will not have this fatigue, if we'll continue to provide without restrictions military support, this is very important. Otherwise, no, Russia must take painful defeat. Otherwise, will be no changes in Kremlin, will be no changes in whatever. And if somebody believes that will be some negotiations, peace, it has nothing to do with peace, it's pause in the war. So they really have to, we have to go to the end. And now coming to the ambassador's question, solidarity is important when it's filled with substance and should be meaningful. And I believe we are coming to that. I'm among those who always, in my tweets, I'm criticizing ourselves, doing not enough, you know, European Union, whatever. But look, recently a statement of Jens Stoltenberg, very strong statement. He said, right, we are paying for price for gas and electricity, Ukrainians paying with blood. And this is not compatible, and we have to assist until the end. Very important statement on behalf of NATO nations, because he's not speaking personally. He's not allowed to do that. Or Ursula von der Leyen, when she stated recently that we mustn't really establish an independent tribunal, but we were assisting among them also. I did that also, initiated that it has to be happen. She told that Commission must be behind and we should do that. And also she told that we should use these frozen assets to reconstruct Ukraine. It's not easy to do legally, should we find some solutions? That was done, that was stated by President of the Commission. So we're coming to the very substantially, not just solidarity, but also very meaningful stage where I hope it will be the reality and we will be able to do that. So let's do our best. Let's not just pretend that we're supporting that, just do that. And also let's understand, especially those who are saying and repeatedly convincing each other that Ukraine must win, they must win, right. But they should realize, some of them, that Russia must lose. And it's not understandable for some, but this is reality. So Russia must lose, otherwise nothing will change, and no changes in Kremlin, and no changes in the politics, and that's it. So let's proceed, and we have potential to win, so let's do that.
Thank you, Linus. And I have identified, and I have quite a challenging task to conclude and to identify those lessons learned that all of you pointed out. I will conclude with what we cannot afford. I think that is also very important. First of all, we cannot afford to have a fatigue, as Marina mentioned. There is only one, from our perspective, from the Baltic perspective, the end state of this conflict. Victory for Ukraine and defeat for Russia. We cannot afford to go to the business as usual. I mean, finally, hopefully, that's been a wake-up call, the last wake-up call for not only the Baltic states, but also for our Western allies. So Baltic states is not done deal when it comes to our defense and security posture here in the region. So there are a lot of homeworks to be done, and also going and looking towards the NATO summit in Vilnius. And we cannot afford to be ununited. I mean, also here in the Baltic states, but in the European Parliament, with our transatlantic partners and closest allies. So, colleagues, thank you very much for your so provoking ideas, differences, but I think that we have a common vision among ourselves. So thank you for coming, thank you for watching, and please join me in a round of applause for the panelists. Before you leave, please take a coffee, snacks, all of that have been served over there. Stay here and enjoy conversations informally. Thank you.